Thank you for listening to the BJJ Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
All right, my friends, welcome back to the BJJ Podcast. This is episode 287. I'm on the line with my good buddy Gary and my good buddy Byron. Before we start the show this week, we need to mention our corporate sponsor, Peter Pan Peanut Butter, producing quality nut butter for discerning customers for over 90 years. Comes in a smooth and a crunchy variety. Peter Pan Peanut Butter. How you doing tonight, Gary?
Well, I just got done eating a Peter Pan peanut butter sandwich, so I'm doing good. I know, Joe, you had a Peter Pan peanut butter sandwich for lunch, and Byron, he just had nut butter.
Sometimes that's enough. Isn't that just Skippy?
Hey, we can't talk about Skippy.
Yep, we dropped them and we picked up Peter Pan.
Yeah. Yep.
But I'm excited about this episode. Here we have Jake Mackenzie, great competitor on the mats, black belt, and also a great coach as well. So we're looking forward to sharing with you the interview that we have with him.
Oh, hold on, guys. I just got a text from Peter Pan Peanut Butter, and they are pretty upset that we said that they're one of our sponsors, and they actually have nothing to do with us. When I told them...
They haven't been giving you free peanut butter?
No, they haven't. But when I told them that we're a jiu-jitsu podcast, they said, oh, sorry, keep doing whatever you want to do. So I think we're okay.
Nice. Our street cred finally paid off.
Finally paid off. And I think they probably saw the article that we're the award-winning #2 ranked podcast in the nation.
In the nation. Gary, that just is confusing. Martial arts podcast, that is.
Okay, martial arts podcast.
There are a few qualifiers there.
Yeah, there's several more that we're not even going to bother to cover. Somebody ranked us as #2 for martial arts podcast, one list, and that's awesome.
We actually think he was probably drunk when he wrote it, but hey, we'll take it.
Yep. Hey guys, something happened on the mats at my home gym last week that I don't know if you've ever seen this before. Midway through a round after class is over, some people stayed to roll late. One of my friends popped the question to his girlfriend right there on the mat.
Awesome.
Yep.
Wow,
so
that's cool.
He's been training about a year. She's been training a little longer or a little shorter. So congratulations, Todd Rodrigue and Vicky Webb. And I bet you Vicky wishes she would have had some forewarning that something like this might happen to her during her first year of jiu-jitsu. There's a lot of things you don't know when you're going into your first year of jiu-jitsu. Byron, tell us a little bit about your book, your audio book that you've written to help people navigate through their first year of jiu-jitsu. And are you going to make an amendment to the book to add what to do when you get proposed to?
Wow. I feel like I've left out, I need another chapter because this was not covered at all. And there's 6 chapters in there, everything from finding the right gym to you, to the benefits of jiu-jitsu, and all the way up to tournaments and what to expect and how to prepare for something like that. Yeah, I kind of need a chapter 7 or maybe 6.5, or no, it wouldn't really be. It'd be 3.5 because chapter 3 is the benefits of jiu-jitsu. 3.5 would be talking about the relationships you could build in jiu-jitsu and even some off-the-mat style of relationships as well. Congratulations to the young couple and their future happiness as a married couple. Man, that's really cool. That's really, it's an audiobook, $11.99. It's really targeted at helping you get to that first year as easily as possible. I know that looking back, everybody in that first year has some struggles that they wish they could have smoothed over, or just some hurdles that they could have got over a little easier. And that's what the book is supposed to help you with. So hopefully that it's helped keep some people on the mats through that first year, because it can be kind of difficult. And it's 2.5 hours long, and it's much like a podcast. It's just me talking to you about your first year of jiu-jitsu. And the money goes to help support the show. So check it out if you are in that category of 1 year or under.
Hey, Joe, do you know if they knew each other before jiu-jitsu, or did they meet at jiu-jitsu?
I think they knew each other in that they went to the same high school, but she's a few years older. I don't think they were friends in high school.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So were they rolling together when he proposed, or
Yep,
how did that go? Oh, that is awesome.
Mid-roll.
That's pretty neat.
So,
What was
so
the
congratulations.
Did he get locked up in a submission, or did she get locked up in a submission and then propose like, hey, or else you go to sleep?
Yep.
Yeah, I'll crank on this Kimura unless you say yes.
Well, the funny thing is, he's been doing jiu-jitsu about a year, and her uncles, though, are all fairly large, formidable local fighters, jiu-jitsu and MMA. Oh. So there was a moment, and they all train with us, and there was a moment he wasn't sure he wanted to tell everybody when they started dating.
Awesome. That's a neat story, Joe.
Yep, definitely. They have that's a cool way to do that, because you have a story that goes with it, and they are fortunate enough to both have somebody close to them, each other, that also does jiu-jitsu, so they could go through that journey as a team.
I remember going to your wedding, Byron, and I'm sitting there in a row, and as I look at the row in front of me, every other person had cauliflower ears. You could just see the ears sticking out and everything, and it'd be man, cauliflower ears, woman, man, cauliflower ears, woman, man, cauliflower ears, woman. So I was like, well, nobody better start trouble at this wedding.
Notice Gary sat in the row behind that row. Got to keep Gary a little further away because he causes trouble sometimes.
They weren't actually going to let me in. And, when I told them my name, they said, not a chance. And then I came back a little bit later with fake glasses and a mustache and said I was Joe Thomas, and they let me by. But the problem is when Joe tried to go, they said, you've already signed in. And Joe got arrested.
I spent the night in the Who's Cow.
Who's Cow?
That was a long and lonely night. But, if you're in prison, lonely's kind of the way you want it.
You got that right, Joe, definitely.
Well, we're covering all sorts of life stories here.
Joe, you got a life story, don't you?
Yeah, should we bring this back to jiu-jitsu?
Let's do it.
Let's do that.
Let's drag it by the ears, Joe.
So tonight's life lesson that maybe we can learn something about jiu-jitsu, once again, has to do with ships. And I've talked the last couple of weeks about emergency response, offshore. It's a little different than being onshore. But more important than how you respond really is prevention. So we all want to respond properly if we have to abandon ship and get ourselves safely into the lifeboats. But preferably, we don't want to abandon ship at all. And one of the biggest tools we have on the boat to keep an eye on stability is really the senior officers and their experience. A captain that's spent his life sailing, he's worked on boats that are, heavy draft, light draft. He's worked in rough seas, and, he knows how a boat should feel when it's intact and its stability is where it's supposed to be. And I think, so as soon as it starts to get out of whack, he can say, something's not right here, and do some investigation and find out that maybe they've sprung a leak and they're flooding some tanks or something of that nature. And I think the way this relates to jiu-jitsu is it really demonstrates the value of just hours and hours of mat time doing good jiu-jitsu. And you get so familiar with that. And then when it starts to feel wrong, like you know how it should feel when you're controlling your opponent's posture and guard. And when you're losing that, you should be able to tell immediately because you've done hours and hours of good jiu-jitsu. Does that make any sense, Gary?
It definitely does, Joe. You think about when we first started training and we didn't have hours and hours and years under a belt. We would be put in a predicament, and we probably didn't know how to react properly. And, there's more than one way to react properly to make sure we're not getting our guard passed, to make sure we get into a good position, stuff like that. But as we put more and more time on the mat, more and more time training, more and more time learning good jiu-jitsu, as Joe says, we are going to know how to react. We're not even going to think about it. It's just going to happen. And that's when jiu-jitsu really started to get fun. When I wasn't thinking, you just went on autopilot. Kind of like what you were saying, Joe. You know what you're doing. I know you've talked the last couple of weeks about if there's an emergency or whatever, you've all trained and you know what to do. You kind of go on autopilot. Everybody knows the rule. And I just think the more time you spend on the mat, the more time you spend training, the more time you spend drilling, the more time you spend journaling, the more time you're on your Maroon app, the more time you're listening to BJJBrick Podcast, you are getting quality jiu-jitsu and getting better and learning, how to react in stressful situations so it doesn't turn into rough seas.
Yep, that's correct, Gary. I was reminded while you were talking, when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, I remember there was a high school wrestler that was in class. It was really good. And I hadn't been doing jiu-jitsu more than a few weeks. And we have this takedown drill, just two guys in the center of the mat. Whoever takes the other guy down, he stays in the center, and, that kind of thing. So I go out there, and here's this high school wrestler, and I just blasted a clumsy middle-aged man double leg. And, man, I took him right off his feet. And it's like time slowed down enough for me to be amazed with how well I was doing, that I was taking this guy down. And by the time we hit the mat, that guillotine was so tight, I hardly had time to tap. So, just a really good example of, if you haven't spent hours and hours of time rolling, you don't even realize you're starting to get in trouble until it's way too late.
Great point, Joe.
Yeah. And I think the big thing is be patient with yourself if you are a little frustrated with your jiu-jitsu. It's training smart does a huge value to that, but also just getting that time in on the mat and getting guillotined when you think you're doing well and these sorts of things. So be patient with yourself, and you'll get there.
Yep, and think about it too. As you're throwing that double leg on, the middle-aged double leg, as Joe said, time moves in slow motion, and as soon as you hit the mat, you're caught in a guillotine. Look at that as an opportunity to learn. I love it if I can learn new stuff. I'm getting caught in that guillotine. Maybe I can realize, maybe my head's in the wrong spot. I got to correct that. Maybe I should hit a blast double and plant my head right into his chest. Maybe I need to learn how to escape guillotines, pop to the other side or whatever I need to do. Maybe work on different takedowns, make sure my head's on the inside if I'm going for a single leg, things like that. And, we're always going to get tapped. And like Byron says, it's, don't get upset. Let's be patient. Let's use that as a learning opportunity, because we are never going to stop learning. Byron's been a black belt for a while, and I know Byron learns every day he's on that mat. I know I learn every day. I know Joe learns every day. And we should have a smile on our face when we're training. Training is always going to be rough. And when we're really buckling down for a competition or an MMA fight or something, it's not going to be fun all the time. But, you get in my category, jiu-jitsu for fun. I'm trying to always have fun out there on the mat, and some days I'm not the hammer, some days I'm the nail, a lot of days I'm the nail, but I'm gonna have fun.
There you go. Sometimes you're a little screwy too, Gary.
Some days, most days.
Some days you're creamy peanut butter. Sometimes you're kind of chunky. That wasn't very nice, was it?
I can't believe you called me chunky. I know you've called me stupid. I know you've called me crazy, but you never called me chunky.
Lumpy is a better.
Yeah, lumpy. But speaking of, you've called me stupid and crazy. We have a quote this week from D. Gary Young. I was told that I couldn't do it. I was stupid. I was crazy. But because I believed in my dreams, I accomplished them. Byron, that's exactly what, I was stupid. I was crazy. Kind of stuff like you've called me.
Kind of lumpy.
I was told,
kind of screwy.
Yeah. I was told that I couldn't do it. And how many times have you heard that? I mean, we should never hear that in all reality. You know, as me being a parent, I don't ever want to tell my kid that he can't do something, because if you put your mind to it, you can do it. And I'm thinking of the best protege, I don't know the word I'm trying to find, is Joe's grandson. Joe, how old is he?
He's just a little over 2.
Just a little over 2. I've seen that kid on a skateboard. Yeah. 2-year-old on a skateboard. It seems like that kid is so adventurous, he'll try anything. And I guarantee you, Joe and his wife are over there, you know, supporting that kid, you know, having him try adventures, as I guess we'd call it, try different stuff. And boy, he's loving it. And I'm telling you, the kid is fearless. He's going to be that guy who was told, well, I guess he's not going to be told he couldn't do it, but he's going to be able to do anything, you know, because he believed in his dreams. He accomplished them. He's tried stuff. He's not afraid to get out there and attempt it. His dreams are going to come true.
Gary, I like how you tied this into Joe's grandson, and I think that it's one of the reasons why kids learn so much so fast is just their brains are wired to do that. They're wired to pick up language very quickly and that sort of thing while they're young. Another reason is they don't really have that fear of failure like we have as adults. They just go out and try it. And if it doesn't work, not a big deal, try it again. And I think as adults, we kind of pick up that, well, that kind of sucked. That didn't work the first time. It wasn't easy right away. Let's find something that's easier. And if we could just shed that attitude, and if you want to be good at something, try it. And if it's not so good, you're not so good at it, try it again. Maybe try it a little differently. And I think that's definitely one learning tool that kids have that's to a strong advantage is if they fail, they fail things all the time. Imagine somebody giving up on walking. Yeah, I kept falling down, so I just stopped, and now I'm crawling everywhere as an able-bodied adult. No, that doesn't, like, you need to fall down in order to learn how to walk and then ultimately run, and you can't just give up. And I think that the attitude that kids are kind of, start off with is one that we lose as an adult. And if we could get a little bit of that back and just say, yeah, that kind of sucked. What else could I do? How else could I approach this problem? We'd all be better off.
That's a great point, Byron. And, I think some of that goes to putting yourself in the right environment. If you're in an encouraging environment, it's going to be easier for you to, kind of take that same path, and you failed once or it was difficult once, but you're going to get up there and try it again. If you've got other people encouraging you to do that, it makes it easier. So picking the right gym is important.
Joe, I like what you said, your environment that you're in, because there are people who tell you can't do it. I've been around people who tell individuals you can't do it. And, I'll tell you, when I started jiu-jitsu, I remember right off the bat, Byron will know what I'm talking about, but getting tapped out by Mr. Poopy. The guy's nickname was Mr. Poopy, and the guy even drew Mr. Poopy on the back of his gi. And I got tapped out by that guy. And I remember telling myself that there's no way I'm going to quit. I just got tapped out by Mr. Poopy. Like, how can you be any lower? I'm at the lowest of the low of the totem pole. And, I'm stubborn. I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to quit. I'm going to find a way to do it. But, and Joe, also, you're talking about the environment. I was reading here, maybe 6 months ago, about praise people for their trying, or praise people for trying something, not for the result. And that's something I never really heard before, and I've been practicing that around my kids, and I've been practicing it with people I work with, and praising them for working hard, for trying hard, for that intensity that they're putting into whatever task they are doing. And there's some studies or whatever that shows that by praising that instead of the end result, because the end result, I could line up across from Byron on the mat, and I'm going to get tapped out. It's not going to happen. And but if I go in there and I give my best, and you praise the result, maybe I won't be, afraid to step out on that mat. Maybe I won't be afraid of losing. Maybe I'll look at losing as a a learning experience, a way to grow my mind, grow my jiu-jitsu.
That's awesome, Gary. Like what you said there. Good news, guys. We have our interview with Jake Mackenzie up right now. He is the most interesting grappler in the world.
I took my unorthodox fighting style to the world of hockey. With my fighting style, I was the second person in history to be kicked off the team for trying to stab somebody with a skate. If I don't like you, you will always find a hair in your mouth when rolling with me.
I don't always listen to podcasts, but when I do, I prefer the BJJ Podcast. Stay sweaty, my friends.
All right, my friends, I'm happy to bring Jake Mackenzie to the BjjBrick Podcast. Jake, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks, Byron. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you here. We've got a lot to talk about. You're a top-level competitor, and you've got a lot of great stuff out there as well that's been helping students grow and learn. But, Jake, if they haven't heard of you yet, just give us a little description of who you are and kind of like a little bit of your jiu-jitsu history, if you will.
Cool, yeah. My name's Jake Mackenzie. I'm from Nova Scotia, Canada. I've been training jiu-jitsu probably for about, I think, like 21 years. Started when I was a kid. Just from a tiny little place in Nova Scotia, town of 10,000 people. But I traveled all over the world competing. I lived in Brazil for, I think, maybe a total of 11 years. I'm married to a Brazilian girl, so I'm in the States right now. I'm in Ohio doing a training camp, but got to train all over Europe, the States, Canada, and a lot in Brazil as well. When
did you first go to Brazil?
I went to Brazil the first time when I was 16. I went for 2 months. I ended up meeting an exchange student that I went to high school with, and we became friends. He actually trained a little bit of jiu-jitsu, so we did some training when he was in Canada, but we became really good friends, and I went back to Brazil with him. I stayed with his family, I think, for 2 months, and then I went back to go visit them again when I was 17, and then I started going to Rio in 2006, and I went to Rio. I stayed 8 months the first time I went.
When did you start doing jiu-jitsu?
I started doing jiu-jitsu when I was 12.
Okay. What was you said it was like a smaller place. What was it? What was the transition like from going, starting like at home and then going to Brazil and training there? If you can remember that.
So I was super fortunate because like I'm from this tiny little town called Truro, Nova Scotia. It's just it's a town that has maybe a population of 10,000 people. And it's just on the side of the highway. But by some crazy circumstance, Marcia Fatoza from Gracie Baja and Carlos Gracie Jr., who's the head of Gracie Baja in the IBJJF, there was a guy in town that got interested in jiu-jitsu, and he was fairly well off, and he actually brought those guys back like in, I think, 97 or 98 was the year I started. So my first jiu-jitsu class was with those two guys, and Marcio ended up staying for a couple months, actually. So I was exposed to high-level jiu-jitsu right from the very first day, but I didn't really have any idea about the culture of jiu-jitsu, and all the guys that started with me were brand new, and they were just kind of figuring out about jiu-jitsu as well. So it was a big shock when I went to Brazil and I saw how competitive the guys were and how competition-orientated all the classes were. It was definitely a big eye-opener for me, and I really think that I made the move down there so I could be just immerse myself in that community and get used to competing at a high level and competing often as well.
When did you start competing?
I probably did jiu-jitsu for a couple years before I competed, and that was basically just because there was absolutely no avenue for me to compete. Like in Nova Scotia, when I started training, there was no tournaments. And then eventually when I was about a blue belt level, there was like one tournament a year, but I was like 15 or 16 and there was no like kids or juveniles divisions. So what my dad would do is I did quite a bit of cross training when I was younger. Like I did a little bit of judo. I did a lot more wrestling than judo. And I always tell my dad like, oh, I want to get into competing. I want to be a jiu-jitsu competitor. My dad was like, you got to be able to compete to become a competitor. So I do judo tournaments. I probably did maybe 10 judo tournaments when I was a kid. I did a lot of wrestling tournaments when I was a kid in Nova Scotia. I probably did, I don't know, 20, 30, maybe 40 wrestling competitions when I was like in my teens.
Do you think that doing that kind of that mix of judo and wrestling helped you for jiu-jitsu?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was fortunate too. We would travel to go train wrestling. I traveled probably an hour there and an hour back. But I had access to a really good coach there, a guy that, Corey Robinson, he was on the national team for wrestling in Canada. And he's somebody that had a huge influence on me in my grappling and especially for competition as well, because I think wrestling, that mindset makes you really tough. I think it's a different pace. It's a different grind than jiu-jitsu is. And I was really fortunate that I had him. And there's still stuff that I do in my jiu-jitsu that was stuff that he taught me that came from wrestling as well.
The first time going to Brazil, what was that like? I mean, you're fairly young. You had somebody you knew down there, which I'm sure was helpful. But were you training? Was it the purpose of your trip to train, or was there something else going on as well?
So yeah, the purpose of my trip was to train pretty much solely. Like, my dad thought it was a good opportunity, like that he could send me down there and I would be there with the family. And the guy that I stayed with is a really good friend of mine. And I ended up training twice a day the whole time I was down there, and I actually sometimes 3 times a day because I was taking privates down there as well. The first 2 times that I went down actually were pretty easy because I was staying with a family. Like, you know, it was close to the gym. I didn't really have to worry about too much. Everybody in the family could speak English, so I didn't really have to go out of my comfort zone too much. But the third time I went to Brazil, when I went to Rio by myself for 8 months, that was a big shock for me because I didn't have someone I could stay with. Like, I had to scramble and try to find a place to live. I found out that a lot of Brazilians don't speak any English at all, so that was a lot trickier too. So I started to learn Portuguese a lot more. Like, the first 2 trips, I don't think I learned very much Portuguese. I might have learned, like, I don't know, 10 or 20 words, and not very many of them were useful, you know. But then the first time I went to Rio, I think after the 8 months, it was a big shock, but I learned a lot in that trip. I learned a lot about, I think I grew up a lot because I was on my own for the whole 8 months in a different country. I couldn't speak the language, you know. Yeah, but the third trip was a shock for me. The first 2, I didn't find that bad.
When did you figure out that you were going to be competing at a high level? Like, was there a certain tournament that you kind of surprised yourself at, or was it just a gradual growth of just climbing that ladder?
I'd say a little bit of both, to tell you the truth. Like, I really didn't know how to compete at all when I first started competing. To tell you the truth, like, I went to the Pan Ams a couple times when I was a kid. Like, that was the one tournament a year I would do, the jiu-jitsu tournament. And I medaled both years I did it, but I didn't know the rules at all. You know, I didn't know why I won a match or why I lost a match. Like, I knew if I submitted the guy or the guy submitted me, but I had no idea. I had nobody coaching me. But when I got down to Brazil, I started to do some of the local tournaments, some of the smaller ones, and I started to have success at that level. And I was like, okay, maybe I can start doing this. And I remember I would do really good at the smaller tournaments, and when we get to the bigger tournaments, I would kind of psych myself out a little bit. And I had some really good matches against really tough guys, but I really would never go too far in the big tournaments. I might win 1 or 2 matches and lose in the third, you know. But I remember we fought a state tournament in Rio in 2007. I was a purple belt. And the state tournament used to be a really big tournament. Like, you'd probably get 3,000 competitors at a state tournament, 12 mats, big gymnasium. And I've been training really well. And I remember I was like, man, I'm going to be really strategic in my first fight in the weight division. And I was so strategic that I got called for stalling a bunch, because I did stall a whole bunch. And I ended up losing the first match. And I was just like, oh, man, I trained so hard for this. And my coach ended up putting me in the absolute division. And I didn't really want to do it. And I was just like, oh, no, I just want to go home, man. Like, I didn't fight good. And the open weight, I ended up winning, I think, 5 matches, and I got to the finals. And I lost in the finals. But one of the guys the guy I beat in the semifinals, was really, really good. He was a couple-time world champion, and he beat Bernardo Faria. He beat Rodolfo Vieira at the lower belts, and I ended up beating him in a really good match in the semifinals. And I think after that tournament, it gave me a lot of confidence, man. It really changed my mindset. I started to realize that I could hang with the better guys, and soon afterwards, I won the Pan Ams. I got second at the Brasileiros in the Absolute. I won a couple big tournaments, and that's kind of where the ball started to get rolling for me.
And you're not at the upper end of the weight scale in the open division, right?
No, I was a lightweight at the time, and I could have made featherweight. I fought a couple tournaments at featherweight at that time, so I was like 160 pounds on with a gi. The guy that I fought was in the semis was a bigger guy. He was like a super heavyweight. Wow.
That would be a tremendous confidence booster, a tremendous feeling of hey, I'm pretty good at this. You beat a guy like that, and also with the size difference, and man, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I was really scared to fight him, to tell you the truth. I remember at the tournament, I had fought with this gi on, and it was it's like a coral gi, and it had it was a white gi, but I had black lapels. I'd done all my matches in it, and I remember when we got to the semifinals, the coordinator of the tournament, he kind of just spotted me. He's like, no, you can't compete with that gi on. You got to change your gi really quick or you're going to get DQ'd. And I didn't even really want to fight the guy. I was so scared of him. I was like, no, I'll just take third place. And my coach got me this gi that was way too big for me. They switched it up, and I was like, man, how am I going to fight the guy with this, man? It looks like I'm wearing a potato sack. And he was like, just go in there and do it. And I was so scared, man. But I went on autopilot in the tournament, and to tell you the truth, at that point it was definitely my best match ever. I was like, man, I just gotta stop overthinking this and just kind of go and trust my instincts. And I think that was a big step for me.
If you're coaching a student and they look nervous, a lot of students of course look nervous when they go out and compete, but they're to the point where they don't roll the way they should. They're doing great in class, and then when they go compete, they're slowing things down, or they're just not themselves. It sounds like that was kind of that kind of happened to you at that moment. You were so nervous, but then something switched, and you went to perform. What would you say to a student that you're coaching who looks really nervous about competing or doing the next match?
Yeah, so this is good because I do coach a lot. I was one of the head coaches of the GF team in Brazil for probably 5 or 6 years. So I had the opportunity to work with lots of different kids. I had the opportunity to work with kids that were absolute killers, that were multiple time world champions, national champions. And I had the opportunity to coach kids that are just getting their feet wet, or, kids that did have a lot of different issues with performance anxiety. And I try to tell a lot of the kids the same thing, at the end of the day, you're there to have fun, because, if jiu-jitsu wasn't fun for me, if competing wasn't fun for me, to be 100% honest, I wouldn't do it, and I just tell them, go out there and have fun. And another thing, trust your instincts. Your instincts are you can think about what's going to happen 100 or, 1,000 different, options or different scenarios that are going to happen. But when you step on the mat, whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Your instincts are going to take over, and there's got to be a winner and a loser at the end of the day. So I just try to tell the guys, have fun, try to trust your gut. If your body is telling you to do something, to go left or to go right, trust that, and try to listen to your corner as much as possible, because we're going to try to point you in the right direction. But just a couple basic things like that. Yeah.
That's great. That it seems counterintuitive. When we start jiu-jitsu, you trust your gut, and you get your back taken, you get choked out, you get a triangle. There's so many things that happen immediately when you trust your gut. But after you train hard and you get those hours and hours of time on the mat, you're the gut changes, and trusting that there's a reason, because your brain has changed, and it now recognizes things ahead of time, and I think that's great, and trust that your training has been good, and that if you're wanting to do something, or you think this is the right move, go for that, because you've got thousands of hours of practice to back that up.
Sure, yeah, I agree 100%, man, 100%. And I think another thing that I tell the kids too, because a lot of times I coach in the competition classes for years on a daily basis is, especially the kids that I know that would work really, really hard. You know, I would tell them in training before the tournament, I said, just make sure that you know that you deserve to win at the end of the day. You know, don't leave any stone unturned. Like, if you put the work in, I think that's a really good feeling to have going into a tournament. Like, my best tournaments that I've ever fought are ones that I know that I put more work in than the other people did, you know? So I try to tell the young guys that too, you know, like, it's hard to believe that you're going to win if you know deep down that you don't deserve to win, you know?
Yeah. Jake, I want to rewind a little bit and learn a little bit more about you and maybe some of your favorite techniques that you've used out there.
Yeah, so I'm a big half guard player. I played half guard for like a really long time, since I was a blue belt. I played a lot of deep half guard for a while. So my name kind of just started to get a little bit bigger in the competition scene because I played a certain style, and I know like in 2008, 2009, deep half guard got really, really popular. And now I play a whole bunch of different types of half guard. I play a little bit of deep half guard, some knee twist, some reverse half guard. I have a lot of material on YouTube, and there's a lot of I have some DVDs out too with BJJ Fanatics, so if anybody's interested in that style of game, they can check those out. I think the first 2 volumes we did in the DVDs, there's 80 or 90 different positions in between the 2 of them. Yeah, so I'm really known for my half guard from the bottom, and lately, like the last couple of years, I've been really getting into some different styles of passing too. But mostly pressure passing. Yeah, but that's pretty much what I play.
What is it about that style, or like the half guard, that has attracted you to it so much?
To be 100% honest, I remember I was in Canada when I was young, when I was like a blue belt, and I did a private lesson with this guy. He was a Canadian guy, and he's at the time he was one of the better guys in the country. And he was. I did a private with him. I asked him for some feedback after the lesson, and he was a good competitor. Not the friendliest guy in the world. And he's just like, "Man, your half guard is terrible." And he was true. It was true what he said. But I was like only 14 or 15, and I remember when he told me that, I was like, "Man, I knew that I was going to go to Brazil soon because my dad had talked about it. I think I was 15 at the time because I went when I was 16, and I was like super motivated when I got to Brazil. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to learn as much half guard as possible when I'm there. And it was just a really funny coincidence because the guy that I ended up training under in Brazil the first time I was there is Eduardo Jamelon. He's like a former Alliance guy. He's a Checkmat guy now, I think. But he had a huge influence on like Jeff Glover and Bill Cooper. And he actually is the guy that pretty much invented the deep half guard, or really like revolutionized it, you know. He was a really top level competitor. So all we really did for the 2 months that I was at his school the first year and the 4 months the next year was we'd do half guard every single day. So it was a pretty good little it was a good coincidence that I ended up at that school, and I ended up doing private lessons with one of his students too. And I did them almost like on a daily basis. The currency from Canadian money to Brazilian money was really good. And the guy wasn't a big name guy. He was a really good black belt. So he charged me like a super fair price. So like I had a huge jump up on my half guard game from the first trip to Brazil. And then I came home and I started having success with that. And my uncle in Canada, who was my coach, my Uncle Kevin, he told me, he's like, man, you should stick with this game. And he really helped me develop that game too. So probably from the time I was 16 is when I started playing it a lot.
Jake, to me it seems like the half guard and the deep half are like totally different guards almost. Like I don't like playing half guard. I don't have a good half guard, and it's just like it's a tough position for me. I like deep half. I've had some success with it, and it's fun. Am I missing something there, or are they actually fairly different, or is one just is half guard a pathway to get to deep half sometimes? What am I missing here?
You're right on the money, man. Like there's going to be different styles of half guard that you can play, and you know, I've got a couple that I'm really good at, and there's other styles of half guard, to be honest, that I'm terrible at. You know, I've been doing half guard for 20 years, but there's certain things that I do really well, and certain things that I don't do well. But I would definitely say half guard is definitely not for everybody, because there's a lot of you getting smashed involved in it. Like, I actually pride myself in a good shoulder pressure that I can take, or a good smashing that I can take without letting someone pass my half guard. But it's definitely not a game for everyone, man. I think you got to have it's like an inches game. You've really got to have little tiny victories inside the position, where your head is at, and there's so many different little details. But deep half guard is nice because you can kind of keep the guy off you a little bit more. You're not taking that smashing as much, But the style that I play, I think my ears are really cauliflowered, and my face has been smashed a couple times because I've played that game for 20 years.
Yeah, that may be my main issue with even just going to have sometimes is this guy's gonna smash me and take all the fun out of it, but yeah, deep half is a lot harder to smash somebody if they're that far underneath you, is what it seems like to me, and I get to there and there's no pressure, and sometimes they pass them as they get swept, but it's a more pleasant experience for me, not being the toughest guy on the mat.
Oh, I understand, man. I have kids all the time in Brazil, when I coached in Brazil a lot, and when I coach in Canada, and they're like, oh, I want to play half guard. And I'm just like, let's try it out for a month and let's see how you like it, because it's definitely not for everyone, man. So,
and I know it's just over audio here. What is reverse half guard? That's one of your DVDs that talks about reverse half guard or shows techniques in that. What does that really mean?
So reverse half guard is just when the guy does the back step.
Okay.
So if he's trying to tackle the knee bar or different stuff like that. And honestly, to tell you the truth, that's my best position. A lot of what all the success I've had over the last couple of years in competition has been from reverse half guard, probably from, I'd say late blue belt on. So I really try to force guys into that position a lot, and I have a lot of little tricks and sneaky things that I do to try to get the guy to go to the back step. And I'm very comfortable when I land there, and I think I try to tell a lot of my students this is, it's good if you can get really good at certain positions and be able to put people there, because if you can clock more hours into that position and you can constantly put your opponent there, you're going to really, increase your percentage of, how many times you're going to be able to sweep the guy, submit him, or, how many matches you're going to be able to win from those spots. So it's a weird spot, but I play from there a lot. So I feel very comfortable when I land there.
Yeah, that's awesome, and you kind of just funnel the match to where you want them to be, and like blue belts. If you want to tap out purple belts, put them in a spot where you've trained a lot and they're kind of unfamiliar with, and suddenly they'll have a blue belt level of training in that spot, maybe even a white belt level of training in that spot, and they become human again, and it really opens things up. So we should all be looking for, kind of places in our games where you spend a lot of time and energy and focus on something, and then be able to get there. And jiu-jitsu gets easier when you're in a spot like that.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, man. I think you're right on the money on that.
So what are your plans for this coming year?
So this year I've been doing this quite a bit, actually. I've been coming to Ohio quite a bit to do my training camps. I train here in Columbus a lot now. I trained in Brazil, like I said, in Brazil for 10, 11 years total. And I like the training down there, and I learned so much from the training there, but I've really connected with one of the guys here in Ohio. We've been friends from a long time, for over 10 years. Vitor Oliveira is his name. He's really top-level competitor at lightweight, multiple time world medalist. And we've always been good friends, but he's got a great school down here in Ohio, in Columbus, Ronan Training Center. And I've come down here to do a couple of different camps, and I just find I learned so much from him. We're training partners, but I treat Vitor like a coach too. I go to him a lot for different advice on different matches or how I'm kind of putting my training together. He's a really smart guy. So he's my main training partner, but he's also one of my main coaches right now too. And I really enjoy coming down here. And another thing too is like he's got a great group of guys at the gym. There's lots of good guys for me to train with. And also Ohio is super strong for wrestling, so I've been exposed to like getting to cross train with some really good wrestlers here. Like Sal Marandino is one of the guys that's helped me a lot. He was a wrestler from OSU, from Ohio State, and they have a super strong program. And I found like that's really benefited me as well. But being at Vitor's gym, it's my favorite place to train. Like over the last couple of years, it's a great spot.
Well, that's awesome, and I'm sure they appreciate having you there as well.
Yeah, I'm happy, man. I'm really happy. I got back here actually probably just like 3 days ago to start doing a camp, start getting ready for some stuff. I had a couple injuries at the end of the year that I was just trying to take care of, so I didn't really train too much at the end of the year. Like the last 2 months, I was training like 3 times a week. And I'm usually training like 3 times a day. So it was a nice little break, but I'm really happy to be back in Ohio. And yeah, man, they've got a great squad here.
That's awesome. You also have a DVD out with BJJ Fanatics, Gringo Passing. Tell me a little bit about that and what that's about.
Yeah, so man, it was funny because when I first started training jiu-jitsu, like I got really good at the half guard, and that was kind of like my main focus. And I completely neglected the top. You know, like I was super strategic, and I did really good at big tournaments when I started to have success. But overall, my jiu-jitsu, I tell the students this all the time, overall my jiu-jitsu was very, very limited. Like, you know, I was good at maybe like 2 or 3 positions. And I was really good at getting there, you know, and keeping the person in that position. And I won a lot of matches. I won a lot of tournaments because of that. But overall, like I said, like my jiu-jitsu was super limited. Like on top, like if you looked at me hard, like I'd fall to my back. You know, my passing was non-existent. And Julio, the head coach, who's been my head coach for the last 10 years, when I got to Brazil, like that's one of the first things he told me. He's like, man, you're a really good competitor. Like you're really smart, like strategic, and you win a lot of matches, but you've got a lot of holes in your game. He's like, man, we really gotta start like getting you a good top game, because now you're a black belt. Everybody's good at certain spots, and you know, and most of the best guys, or all the best guys, are good everywhere. And he had a huge influence on me, man. And honestly, to tell you the truth, I feel probably as comfortable playing on top as I feel playing on bottom now. But that was like a 10-year process for me to do that. I've really forced myself to train on top a lot. And now, honestly, in training, I prefer to train on top more than I train on bottom, because I think it's easier on my body. And so it's just a lot of the different concepts and different passing styles that I learned in Brazil, training with Julio, and then training here with Vitor in Ohio as well. Vitor's an amazing guard passer. He's someone that's really helped me a lot too, in my passing. And just a couple different styles of passing. I play a couple different positions that I don't think people play on the top. Like I play like a cow catcher position from the top of half guard. That's on the DVD quite a bit. And I've had a lot of success with that over the last couple of years in competition too. Yeah, so I really wanted to do a DVD on all the passing, because I've really been into that for like the last 10 years. I've been into the passing just as much as the half guard, you know?
Yeah, there's I think that time in everyone's game where you prefer one or the other, and it's like, I got to start learning the other one. And it is a little bit of growing pains there, because like you start to roll or you start to train, you know that if you go to your half guard, you're going to do great, but you're like, I got to work on passing. And for a little while, it's not going as well as it should, because you're having to take that step back and you get to a place in the game where you're not so familiar.
Yeah, I wish I would have done that earlier, to tell you the truth, man. But I think that's just an ego thing. Like when I was younger, I'd be like, you know, I'd be so concerned about winning every round in the gym, you know, like, and especially against guys that were my weight or like my belt level or like the same level of competitor I was always so like focused on winning. And I just think that winning in the gym really doesn't mean anything. You know, you're not winning any money. You're not winning a medal. You're not winning a big title. And once I started to let that go and I cared a little bit less about my results in training, I think that made a big difference, because I could put myself out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, that's a great example. Being a half guard player, do you like to pass the half guard?
Absolutely, yeah. Because the thing is like I tell most of the guys this, that that especially that I train with. Like if you get really good at sweeping from the half guard, you have to get really good at passing the half guard because, man, like 9 times out of 10, you're going to land in the guy's half guard when you reverse him from the half guard, so if you can get yourself really good at passing at the half guard, it's just you're going to be able to surpass the guard a lot of times because you're landing in a spot that you're already good at. Like that's the first part that I got good at passing on top was half guard. I was terrible everywhere else. Like if you put me in the spider guard, I had no idea how to get out, or like if you put me in De La Hiva. But the very first spot that I kind of got good at passing was the half guard because I would land there all the time. I'd sweep the guy and then I started to get some pressure on top, and that was kind of where I started to play from the top from.
Yeah, and that's great because it's it's the place you are forced to pass from is that the top half because you've got there from bottom half, so it's kind of a natural progression in learning to pass it. I'm thinking about some of my teammates, several of them like force a half guard on me and then they pass my crappy half guard. But what they don't do is they don't play half guard themselves. I think that's a great advantage for them to start to like look into that. If you like to pass the half guard, you should also be playing the half guard because it's going to put you in that spot. Because like when they are playing guard against me and they sweep me, they just end up in like, some position. It could be guard or wherever. But like if you're going from half guard to a half guard you like to pass, as you get your sweep, man, that's so much better. You're keeping them in that funnel. You're keeping them in that path where you're going to perform well.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, man. And another thing is like, if they're good at passing the half guard, they're going to have a good understanding on how to do the half guard because they're going to know what to prevent from the bottom. I think there's such a flip side to that coin. Like if you want to be a good guard passer, you have to understand what the guy in the bottom's looking for. And vice versa. Yeah, so I think that's a really good point.
It just takes time to get better at these spots, but some of them like compound on each other, and that's definitely worth the investment in your time to work on those. So a lot of people out there that compete, they find a particular challenge in the moments leading up to the match, like trying to stay calm or stay focused. Or get to the right level of excitement. What do you do before a match, and how does that help you?
Man, I get super nervous still, man. I've been competing since I was like 15. I'm going to be 34 next year, so I've been competing internationally for like 19 years. And, man, I still get super nervous. I have like kind of like a whole routine that I do the day before the tournament, like the month before the tournament, like how I prepare, and on the day too. I think if you can keep yourself in a routine and just like realize that it's just another day at the office, And I think another thing is like I said, like trusting my instincts and like just pulling the trigger, Like I won a lot of tournaments when I was younger that I really didn't like open up at all. Like I played so safe, and I think you do have to be safe and strategic, but I do think, you want to take chances because if you're confident in your skill set and you know that you've put the time in, I think those will pay dividends in the match if you just like trust your instinct and pull the trigger, but I definitely still get really nervous. And, for me, my wife competes at a fairly high level too. She's a purple belt. So a lot of times now I found this has helped me a little bit because I'm more nervous of her competing because I can't control the outcome than I am of myself competing. And a lot of times we compete on the same day or on the same weekend. So like I have to worry about her and making sure that I have her like 100% ready for the tournament, leading up to the tournament and on the day of the tournament from match to match. And, I've actually found over the last couple of years, that's kind of taken a little bit of pressure off me. Like I almost get a tiny little bit of like an adrenaline dump. And I'm a little bit calmer for when my matches are up, and it's actually worked in my favor a little bit. But, yeah, man, I think being able to control your mindset and just control your emotions and your thought process is so important. I think if you're not in the right headspace, you're not going to be able to, perform at your highest level.
Yeah, it's important, and you have those routines. And I don't know how important like each step in your routine is versus the fact that there is routine that you have. I think that gives some level of confidence. Like, okay, I did this, I've done this. Today I've ate this for breakfast, or whatever the routine is. I think people find comfort in that, and that helps them on the mental side as well. And you know what? If you look back at your history, like one of the should have been like one of the worst matches ever was one of your best. Like your routine was totally thrown off. You wore a gi that wasn't yours. You were out of your weight class. It was you're super intimidated by the guy. You did great. So like I think that's all of us as well. Like you could be super nervous. You could have missed a meal. You could have just thrown up from being nervous. Whatever it is, you could still go out there and do amazing. Just it could be out there for you. So.
I agree, man. Like some of my best tournaments were ones that I was injured or I was sick too, where I just had like zero expectation going in, and there was no pressure on me. I found and that works in your favor sometimes too, man. It's crazy how your brain works, before the match and during. But no, I agree with you, man. Sometimes all the circumstances can be like not going in your favor, and it can work out at the end of the day as well.
If you were to make like a cheat sheet for somebody who's going to start competing, like do these few things, what would be on that cheat sheet?
I'd probably say like at the very top of it, I tell all the young guys this, and this is something that my old wrestling coach, he taught me, and I owe him a lot for my mindset about competition. Like he had a huge influence on me from the time I was very young. Because he was a very high level competitor. Like he almost went to the Olympics for wrestling. And he would tell me all the time, he'd be like, don't think about the outcome. He's like, think about the process. Think about all the things that you have to do to get the desired outcome that you want. He's like, don't think about whether you're going to win or lose. Think about staying in your stance, lowering your level, keeping your hands in front, good movement, think about your lines of defense. Think about where you have to control, where you want to put the guy. So I tell this to a lot of the students too. That's one of the first things I tell them. I'd say, trust your instincts. And also I tell them a lot, just, focus on the process. Don't focus on the result. The result will come. If you do the things right that that you have to do right, and you're able to implement those into the match, you're probably going to win, But if you're worried about winning and losing, that's not good. You got to be in the moment. You need to be focused from, position to position.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do. It's just if your focus is I want to win, that's not focusing on how it's done, and you'll get distracted, and you won't pull that trigger like you're saying sometimes. If your focus is on hey, I want to get half guard, I want to sweep him, I'm going to pass his half guard and choke him out. Like so, first step, get your half guard, or whatever your focus is. Focus on the tasks at hand and performing versus the result, which is oftentimes a pitfall that people fall into.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I would say too, man, that I forgot to say was really worry about how the match starts too. Like especially like at high level competition jiu-jitsu, like if you're in a match at the Worlds or not the World Pro or at a big tournament, if you get behind the 8 ball, it's really hard to recover, especially if you're going against someone really good, because they're going to be really good at dictating the pace of the match and keeping you in their comfort zone, So like I tell a lot of the students too is like, don't, you got to worry about the process, but you need to really worry about the first like 10 seconds, like to get your guard pull off or to time a takedown off their guard pull. Like you want to try to always be first right away, So I think it makes winning a lot easier. Like if you can get like a step in the right direction right off the bat, I think it makes it a lot easier for you to dictate the pace of the match and be able to pull the guy into where you're good and to keep him, away from where he's good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could everyone knows the experience of rolling with somebody, and let's say you're playing your guard game and they just pass your guard and they annihilate you. And then the same person, maybe in a few days, you're playing your top game and it's exact opposite. You pass their guard and you beat them. It's getting the start to the match can be a huge deal. Like somebody who may seem impossible to beat, if it starts off a different way, is quite beatable because they're now, playing into your system.
Oh, I agree. I agree with you 100% with what you said. Yeah, I've had matches where to be 100% honest, that I thought that I was like, man, there's no way that I can beat this guy. Like, people that I idolized for a long time. And when I was able to put them into my spots, and then you start to slowly build confidence, you're like, okay, this guy's a human. He's got, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. Like, I can do something here. And I've won a lot of matches like that with guys to honestly, I didn't think that I could beat before I fought them. But if you can put them in those spots, everybody's beatable,
Yeah.
Unless maybe Hydra Gracie. Hydra Gracie is probably one of the toughest guys on the planet to beat,
You have a lot of great coaching advice and tips. You've got a lot of experience with that. Can you give yourself like a compliment about your style of coaching, or something that you like to do as a coach to the students?
I'd probably say my probably strongest attribute is just be how much competition experience I have. I probably have 600 or 700 matches, and most of them in Brazil. And I've got to work with a lot of high level athletes. Like, I've got to work with Mauricio Oliveira is one of our kids. He's like a 3 or 4 time world champion, and I've worked with him closely from the time he was a young kid. And I try to put myself in their shoes a lot of times, because I was not a natural by any stretch of the imagination. I was a chubby kid that started jiu-jitsu, and I had no athletic ability, and I kind of slowly went through the ranks, and I was able to compete at a very high level. So I think my experience, because I think you really need to exploit your skill set. You're going to have things that you're going to be good at and things you're bad at. If you can tell a kid, build their confidence up, I think those are kind of the building blocks for success. If you can start to build their confidence, start to get them to win matches, then start to win smaller tournaments, then a little bit bigger tournaments, I think that would probably be my strongest attribute as a coach.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think that's part of the reason why the people you coach are have had so much success.
Yeah, some of them, man. I've been lucky enough to work with some kids that have had a ton of success. I've worked with other kids that were phenomenally talented that didn't have the same amount of success, and I've worked with other kids that had no talent, man, and have won national and world titles. I think the coach has a huge part to do with it, but I think really too it's the self-drive of the competitor. If you get somebody that's really driven and they're determined that they're gonna get to a certain point, and they can just block out a lot of like the noise of people telling them, because there's going to be 1,000 people on the way up that are going to tell you that you can't do it. There's going to be very few people that are going to tell you that you can. But I think, like, I've worked with lots of kids that were just super determined too, man, that just said, you know what, I don't care what anyone says, I'm going to make it. And I think I'm really fortunate I had the chance to work with them, because I think, I was able to teach them a lot, but I think they were able to teach me a lot too, about being a competitor. I think when I started coaching more, I think it had a huge impact on me as a competitor in a positive way.
Oh, that's awesome. Jake, what do you tell them, or tell a student when they lose a tough match and they come off and they're pretty disappointed in how it went? Do you have any particular thing you say to somebody like that?
First thing I just tell them, I just say it's part of the game. There's got to be a winner and a loser. That's what we're doing. You're going to win some, you're going to lose some, and man, it's true what they say. Like, it's a bitter pill to swallow. I've lost lots of big matches. I've won lots of big matches. But I'll tell you right now, all the big matches that I've lost have stuck with me a lot more than the big wins. You take a lot more away from a loss. It's so good for your learning development. And if you can get around that and really, like, be introspective and look into, like, okay, why did I lose that position? Where did things start to go wrong here? I think if you can control that and look at that very honestly, like, without having an ego, I think your losses are, will really kind of structure the kind of competitor that you're going to become, if you can get around them. But a lot of times it's just, telling kids, like, you made a mistake. That's where things went wrong. Let's go back to the drawing board and let's work on that so it doesn't happen again. But like everybody, everyone's different. You get kids that, man, they lose a match and they won't show up for a month because they're bummed out. And then you get kids that lose a match and they're in the gym the next day drilling that thing. And it works different for different people. But I think mostly you got to just tell them, like, losing's part of the process. Everybody loses.
Yeah, it's amazing the mindset people have going in. Like, oh, I'm going to win this for sure. and then when it doesn't go well, they're so surprised that could have happened. But and part of what you said is depends on the kid or depends on the person, and that's also really great advice, because not everybody needs to hear the same thing. You might need to boost their confidence next time. You might need to motivate them. You might need to. It might be technical advice, like you were saying. There's a lot of different things you could get the message to, but it's just part of the process. Yeah, if you're going to compete, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some, and
yeah. No, I had a really good coach, man. I had a guy that was a really good friend of mine. He was a really high level judo coach in Brazil. He worked with a lot of Olympic athletes and stuff like that, and he's someone that had a huge impact on me too. And I remember I would talk with him like maybe twice a week. I'd go to his house and we'd just chat. And I remember he told me one time, he said, "Man," he said, "you got to realize," he said, "that anything can happen in between those four lines. You know, anything is possible." He said, "So you can't really count on what's going to happen. You got to kind of go with the flow and trust your instinct." And I try to tell kids that too, like, you know, anything can happen, man. You can be winning 100-0 and get choked to sleep, or, you know, twist your knee, or something can go wrong. So I just try to tell them that, like, losing's a part of the game, and it's going to really form like the type of competitor you're going to be in the future.
Yeah, in a positive way. Like, it'll help you
in a positive way.
Give you some direction.
If you know how to deal with it, it can also some kids that are like, I see this a lot with kids that are super talented that win a lot. Man, they can't deal with losing a lot of times. A lot of times it's the kids that are not naturals, that are the young guys that are in there and they're getting pounded and pounded and pounded, and they're used to dealing with adversity all the time. Once they start to win, they can really look at the losses more constructive. They can say, okay, I went wrong here. But a lot of times if you get young guys that are super talented, sometimes they don't deal with adversity as well as others do,
Yeah, I think that you take those and you learn from them and you grow. And some kids are used to winning and they get that loss and it's like, this isn't fun anymore, and that could be it, and that's too bad.
Sure, yeah, because you see a lot of those guys fall by the wayside. Like, I remember coming up through the belts with different kids that, when I was younger, and I'm just like, man, that guy is so amazing. That guy's gonna be a black belt world champion for sure, And especially when you get to black belt, you really have to learn how to deal with losses. I remember Vitor, that was one of the first things he told me, because he was already in 2010, he was already a pretty solid black belt competitor. And I remember he told me, we were in São Paulo and I lost a match, and I was really bummed out about it. I actually lost to Leandro Lowe. It was the match. I lost a really close match to him. It was our first year at black belt. I lost him like 4-4. And I lost on a couple of advantages, and I was really bummed out. And he told me, he's like, you know what, man? You just got to get back to the drawing board right away, and you just got to, go, put one foot in front of the other and just get ready to go to the next tournament. He said, because you got to get used to losing a black belt, especially your first couple of years. You're going to win matches, you're going to lose matches. That's just part of the deal. And that's something that stuck with me for forever. I do tell a lot of the guys that too, but I think just being able to realize it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, it's just one event that happened, and it doesn't stick with you, and that's a great attitude to have. How can somebody connect with you or keep up with you on social media?
Instagram or Facebook. I'm terrible at social media, man, to tell you the truth. My wife's always telling me, like, you haven't posted anything for like 2 or 3 months, and I realize that social media is a big part of jiu-jitsu now. Like, it's funny because I'm addicted to Instagram. Like, I'll go on Instagram all the time and look at stuff on Instagram, but I don't post that much stuff. But I'm going to try to get better about that. It's a new year, and like, I'm trying to get better at a whole bunch of different things, and while still focused on competing quite a bit. But yeah, Instagram, you can catch up with me there. I'm going to try to post more stuff this year. And I've been even worse on Facebook lately. I haven't posted anything, I don't think, in a year on Facebook almost, as far as like material or anything like that. But I'm going to try to pick that up. But those would be the 2 ways that you could connect with me.
That's awesome. Do you have any sponsors that you would like to mention?
Yeah, I've got a really good sponsor in Canada, man, that's been helping me a lot. Parabellum Kimonos. They're a small Canadian company. They've been around for like 2 years, and they're starting to pick up some momentum. And I was actually, it was after the Worlds that I got hooked up with those guys. And I had some offers from some bigger companies, because I had a really good tournament. And I was thinking, I'd been on big companies before, and actually one of my good friends is one of the owners of this company, and I was in town to do a seminar at his place out in Calgary, and we had to sit down with his partner, and I just really liked the direction of what they were going to do. And to tell you the truth, man, it's been my favorite company to be sponsored by. They've really gone out of their way to help me. A lot of the stuff that I did like the last 2 years, they have a huge part of it, and they helped me financially a lot. And at the end of the day, too, I'm just really happy because one of them is one of my best friends, and the other guy, I've had a really good relationship with him too. So I'm really proud to represent their company, man. Like, they've gone over and above to help me out, and I'll always try to work my ass off in the gym to try to represent them as much as possible.
Do you have a favorite gi that they have?
They just put out these new gis, man, that they just made. They made like a bunch of white on whites and blue on blues and black on blacks. And I think they're working with a different manufacturer now. And they just sent me a couple, man. And for my body style, they fit me great, man. They're really good. Like, they just get past the gi regulations for me for IBJJF, so I can use them, but they're hard to grip. They're a good cut, sharp looking gi. I really, really like their product a lot. They're great.
Cool. And I'll put a link to them on the show notes, as well as their stuff on social media. Jake, do you have any final thoughts for the audience?
No, man. I appreciate you having me on. It was great having a chat with you. And like I said, if anyone wants to check out my stuff, they can go to bjjfanatics.com. There's tons of them. I've probably got like 50 or 60 matches on YouTube. So if you want to watch some of my matches, because you can study a lot. I study a lot of people's matches. It's a great way to start to pick up people's games. And if anyone wants to message me, feel free on Instagram or Facebook. I just will warn everybody, I'm very lax on both. Like, a lot of times I don't look at my messages or different things. So if I don't get back to you right away, that's just me being lazy.
Not that you're avoiding anybody, just give them time. And
Sure, man. I'd love to hear if anybody has a half guard question for me, or anybody wants to, connect with me. I'm more than happy, man, to talk half guard or anything jiu-jitsu with anybody, man. I'm a huge jiu-jitsu nerd, so I like that. I'm just a little bit lazy when it comes to Facebook and Instagram, even though I'm on them all the time,
Well, you're working hard on the mats. That's the main thing. Jake, it's been awesome talking with you. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it. It's been awesome to talk to you too.
Man, I want to thank Jake for hopping on the podcast and doing an interview with us. It was great to have him on the show, and great to share some of his story with you guys. I want to let you know that there are a lot of people going around claiming to be from Wichita, Kansas. This makes them look good. But Gary and I are actually located in Wichita, Kansas. And if you are going to come through the area, or you happen to be here, let us know. BjjBrick@gmail.com, or send us a message through Facebook, and we'll train with you. We love that. Joe, where are you from, my friend?
Yeah, there's also a lot of people who took one look at Wichita, Kansas, and said, I'm moving someplace nicer.
Let's go south.
No, I'm south of Houston by about 45, 50 minutes. So if you're in the area, let me know. Yeah, I'd love to come train with you.
And you can always tell somebody who says they're from Wichita because they want to claim street cred, but they don't know how to spell it. Wichita is Wichita. A lot of people put a T in there after the I to like the word witch. So if you see that, they're lying. And Byron and I don't know them.
Well, it's also unusual to see anybody from Wichita, Kansas that has any street cred and has no face. No. Some of y'all have some street cred, but all y'all with street cred, you've got face tattoos also. So it's very unusual to see somebody with street cred from Wichita that does not have face tattoos. Dead giveaway.
Joe actually came up here, and he, after looking at everybody around here, he said it's like Viking land. He's like, you got a lot of Nordic people up here. I don't think he'd ever seen so many beards and red hair before.
Yep, a lot of big guys with big beards, and yep.
That sounds like street cred to me.
Yep, battle axe hanging in the gun rack in the back of their truck.
Doesn't everybody have that in their truck?
Guys, I was reading an article, and it happened to be from our friends Katie and Jason Elliott from the Maroon app, and I was like, man, got to just get them on the show to discuss the article, and Jason was available, so here I am discussing this new article. It's actually written by Katie, but I have Jason on the line here, so here is a little discussion about this week's article with Jason Elliott. All right, guys, for the article of the week, the article is Optimizing Body Composition for Jiu-Jitsu Performance. We have Jason Elliott here to help us talk about this and talk about the article. So, Jason, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back.
Yeah, good to have you back. And if everybody doesn't know, Jason is the guy behind the Maroon app, the jiu-jitsu training log app that me and Joe are using quite a bit to log our training, and we do like seeing you guys on there as well. And if you hop on there, send me a friendship request or whatever. Just look up BjjBrick, and me and Joe will both pop up, and you can send us a request, because it's always fun to see you guys training. Anyway, getting off topic already, Jason, but there's an interesting article, and I think it's jiu-jitsu has a little bit of unique hurdles to either get around or to use, I guess, with our bodies and performance.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. It's jiu-jitsu likes to throw a lot of various things at you, and if you start competing, it likes to throw making sure you keep your weight at a certain level at you as well. So it keeps you mentally engaged and physically sort of on your feet, I guess.
But so a lot of sporting events, like let's just say wrestling, where your weight is a factor, there's an off season and then an on season. So fighters or grapplers are able to adjust for that and maybe not alter their training so much while they're on season or off season, whatever. So the article has a lot of good points, but one that I hadn't really thought about is if you're trying to cut weight while you're actively training and trying to get better, it has a negative effect on what you're able to do while you're performing jiu-jitsu. So without the benefit of a down season, it's just hard to do that.
Well, it's interesting because when Katie was explaining this to me, I realized I've been doing it almost completely wrong. In other words, if there was an off season, even if it was sort of, I'm taking the holidays to relax a little bit, I took that as my time to kind of plump up. And then when the training season started, I would sort of then work on leaning out and kind of losing weight to get back to my goal. And, she pointed out that that's sort of the exact wrong way to do it, because you can't, one, you don't get as good a training benefit when you're trying to lose weight. And two, by definition, when you're losing weight, you're losing muscle and fat at the same time. And if you're doing that while you're trying to compete, you're losing muscle. That puts you at a disadvantage. And so it was just funny that for forever I always looked at off season as my chance to either I put on my, like I called it, my winter coat or whatever it was, and then I didn't know that going into it and thinking I'll lean out while I'm training is not necessarily the smart way to do it.
So what is I think that is also confusing to me as well. Like I didn't anticipate that, but it makes sense the way it's explained in the article. I'll put a link to the article in the show notes. But Katie tells a couple ways, like the right way to lose weight. So what would that be?
So the right way to lose weight is you want to lose a little bit at a time. You don't want to go in to sort of say, all right, now's the time. Yesterday for the last 3 weeks I've been eating cheeseburgers and pizzas, and today's the day, and it's nothing but salad and tomatoes and a little bit of lean protein. Because as she explains it, willpower is a muscle, much like your legs, your leg muscles, your arm muscles, or your endurance. It's just another part of it sort of has a limit, like your endurance or your strength. And if you tax it too much like when you're exhausted at the end of a hard roll, you just lay there. That's what your willpower will eventually do. It will just lay there. And so if you go kind of like that cold turkey while you're training and using your willpower to make sure you're going training every day and you're doing the other things right, you won't have enough willpower to fight that incredible light switch mentality of now's the day that I'm really going to dig into this. And so the way she explains it is to handle it as a much more gradual process, rather than think about losing, pounds at a time. It's, a pound or two a week. And so you're making small changes. One of the things she talks about a lot that's not in this article, she talks about being a B+ dieter. So give yourself a little bit of a break in there, and being B+ with your nutrition, rather. So give yourself have some treats every now and then, but be mindful of the treats. Don't just sit and eat a bag of cookies. But if you're out and you want a cookie and it feels really good, then have a cookie. But it needs to be a sort of a broader approach than just today's the day I'm dieting and there's no more sweets and there's no more fun, because you'll eventually crack. And then when you do break, you're going to wind up gaining back more than the weight you lost when you were trying to be on the diet. And whether that's a fad diet or just sort of something you've decided you're only going to eat super clean or super healthy, that just only lasts so long. And that's why people get into these yo-yo cycles. And so if you just treat it like you would anything else, like if I'm going for a run, you wouldn't get off the couch and run a marathon. You'd build into it over time. And that's her approach to sort of losing weight and eating healthy. Is it's something you need to build into to make it sustainable, so that you don't, if you're lifting weights or running, you get hurt and then you have to stop. Well, that's effectively the same thing when you're dieting. Your willpower breaks. That's when you get hurt. You have to stop, and then you can't train anymore. You're not doing it anymore, so you gain the weight back, much like you lost the fitness of not running or lifting weights. That's how she sort of uses the idea that willpower is a muscle, and if you strain it, then you can't use it, and you're on the couch, and you're not getting the benefit anymore. That I was a little rambling there. Did that follow?
Yeah, that makes sense, and I think we've all felt that. You're on a diet, and day one you're motivated, and maybe weeks go by, and you're doing great. Something happens, and it just like clicks, and it's not working for you anymore. And part of the reasons for that sometimes is it's just too extreme or it's too hard to maintain, and so you have that kind of I'm all in or I'm not in at all attitude, and you end up going back and forth. And that's right. Really not what we're trying to do. And also she's very. She makes some great points about it, like altering your nutrition will alter your performance. And so if your goal is to lose 10 pounds this month, you're not going to perform great on the mats. And if you're not, and that's definitely going to affect your ability to develop as a martial artist. So that'll right. be a tough month to really gain much in skill on the mats as well. So if you kind of slow that down a little bit, and lose the weight correctly, you'll be in better shape with your body, and you'll be learning jiu-jitsu at the rate that you should be, because you won't be showing up to class fatigued.
That's an excellent point, because you need both to be successful, right? You need to be at your weight that you want to be, but you also have to be able to bring the knowledge and the ability to use that knowledge. So yeah, I think that's an excellent point. If you're hindering all of that, then kind of the weight goal becomes less important, for sure.
You talked. You mentioned willpower several times, and it's reminding me of the book Willpower by Roy Baumeister, and really enjoyed that book. And it's kind of confusing if you haven't learned about willpower as an actual thing, and then you can test it. And see that it is kind of like a resource that can dwindle throughout the day. And if you, I think, I'm trying to remember the book, but if you sit at your desk with a bowl of, M&Ms, that would be a bad one for me because I like M&Ms, all day, and I don't eat any M&Ms. But then when I get home, I've used that energy, that willpower, all day to resist M&Ms. I'm much more likely to break and get a big bowl of ice cream when I get home in the evening. So to not squander your willpower on things that are going to affect that. So the best thing would be to take those bullet M&Ms and get rid of them. Move them to where they're out of sight, out of mind, and then when I get home, I still have that reserve built up. And it sounds like a weird thing, but they've done a lot of scientific tests about willpower and stuff like that, and it turns out that most people behave this way, and it is kind of a resource that you end up with. It's the same. We all feel it where if if somebody's kind of picking on me all day or yelling at me, or I'm messing up, my reserve for being the calm and cool guy I would like to be is going to go down and down. And by the end of the day, it's like, boom, it doesn't work out for me. And you recharge this with sleep and proper diet and that sort of thing, I think. And I'm trying to remember the book. It's been a while. But it is a resource that you have. It's kind of like running. If you want to run, you have a certain amount of cardiovascular output you can put out. And you could change it a bit, obviously, with running. But it's much better to do things more efficiently with your body and your mind.
Absolutely. One of the things that Katie talks about when she's helping people with their nutrition is, and we do it here, is kind of cleaning your house out of all your temptations, so that you're not, as you said, even if it's not work, if you're just sitting at home and you've got a bag of chips in the cabinet, it just it's like the telltale heart. It just sort of calls to you, and you got to fight it and fight it and fight it. Whereas if it's not even in the house, you may get that urge, I want some chips, but if they're not there, then the urge kind of passes because there's nothing kind of feeding that temptation the whole time. And so, she recommends cleaning out those things out of your house, out of your cabinets, out of your refrigerator, whatever. So it's as you said, it's not just sort of calling you all day long, testing you.
Yeah. And so
one of the things that,
yeah,
go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, the other part that really surprised me, with Katie, is when she talks about how long it takes to rehydrate.
Yeah.
I know I'm definitely one of those guys. If I have a tournament and I'm like 3 or 4 pounds away, to me that's just all right. I'm jumping on the treadmill for an hour and I'm going to sweat it out. And when I'm done, I'll weigh and I'll get my Gatorade and I'll be good to go. And it takes 24 to 48 hours to fully rehydrate. I just never. I mean, I assume that was for people that were going like crazy, like losing massive amounts of water weight. But that was surprising and something that really made me reapproach how I think about getting in that last little bit to get to the weight class.
Yeah, and she says it will affect your ability to perform. She doesn't say you won't perform or you won't win or whatever, but we all want to perform as close to that 100% that I'm capable of, especially at a tournament or something like that. And I think most of us are performing a little bit under that just because we're nervous, or maybe any day you go to the gym, odds are you're not 100% of what you're able to do in the gym. It's just that's how we are. Maybe sleep deprived a little bit, whatever. And so being dehydrated 2 or 3% will hinder your performance. Maybe it drops you down to being 80% of what you should be. Maybe it's just 90%, whatever. But it does change things. And why would you want to mess with that dial and move it down knowingly as you're getting ready to compete?
Well, it's that in the way if you think about it, so maybe that first match in the first round, it's on a tournament, you're enough better than that person that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
If you're already starting the day dehydrated, and then you've got a tournament, and you're nervous, and maybe you're going to the bathroom a lot, or you're doing things so you're not hydrating. You're falling farther and farther behind the hydration curve, heading deeper and deeper into the tournament. So maybe by the time you're in that semifinal or the final, you're actually dehydrated, and that percentage of how it affects your performance. Then it really matters, because you're at either you need to be that person's better, and you got to be absolutely on your best game to get it, or they're the same as you, or they're just below you. But if you're hindered, then you're not going to win any of those scenarios. And you see why you don't want to start at a hole absolutely. It just magnifies throughout the day.
Yeah, I mentioned that. You're the guy behind the Maroon app, and so this idea of getting your weight where you want it to be, and not doing that in a week, or at a high rate of speed. So the Maroon app has actually a tool for that as well.
Yeah, we added what's called Weight Tracker to Maroon, and I think it was either 1 or 2 updates ago, and it's designed to to kind of, you can set a goal out, and it kind of shows you how you can incrementally march towards that goal by giving you a sense of, one, it shows you in a graph where you are in relation to your goal, but when you set it, it kind of tells you how much you need to lose per day to reach that goal. And so if it's, I need to lose 10 pounds in 10 days, it'll say 1 pound a week, and you can go, well, that's not very realistic. That's not going to happen. And so what is more realistic? What falls into that sort of pound a week, 1/10 of a pound a day, 2/10 of a pound a day? So you can sort of play with where you can go if you want to lose at that rate, what that date will look like if you're on it. So it allows you to play with it in a way that, rather than say, I need to lose X number of pounds by X date, this shows you what it looks like. And if you can do that in a healthy way while maintaining your muscle mass and while not taxing your willpower so that you fall apart and, you gain a bunch of it back. And so, she had a huge input in how we kind of developed it without making it a full-on weight loss tracking app, just as a helpful add-in for people that are already using Maroon.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's just another thing in the toolbox set is Maroon, as far as helping us train, not just our gi and no gi training and log, what we're actually doing while we're there, how much time we're rolling. Keep an eye on our weight and make adjustments accordingly. That's great.
Yeah. If I could do a quick, just real quick Maroon plug,
yeah.
We're going to do we're getting ready. I get a lot of feedback on suggestions for how to improve the app from users. And so what we're going to do with this next one is, I've got a big update plan for the summer that's going to focus a lot on schools and finding open mats and everything else. But in the interim, for smaller, I'm going to do a user poll where I'm taking nothing but suggestions from users and then putting the ones that I can make work in the timeline and everything else into a poll that users can then vote on. So it's going to be user-driven, user-voted. It'll be on Instagram and Facebook for what the next, so this sort of interim update feature will have in it. So look for that on both Instagram and Facebook if you're interested in voting on the next user or the next application for the app.
That's awesome. And you guys listening can affect this app. I mean, Jason's right here. This isn't like we're not trying to change Twitter here or Facebook. This is an app that Jason has developed, and he's definitely open to making it. I mean, it sounds like you want to make it the best thing you possibly can make for the jiu-jitsu community, and I really appreciate this app. So thank you so much for your hard work.
Oh, of course. No, the more people are using it, it's hard because, I sit here and we kind of work on it, but I love when I get feedback and somebody says they really like it, because it's really hard to tell, but I just want it to be, sort of the most helpful and useful it can be for the community. I just think that'd be really cool. And I like using it, so it works out.
Yep. And we'll see you guys on the app. All right. Well, thank you, Jason, for stopping by here and talking about this article with me.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it anytime. Either myself or Katie are always happy to talk. Always have a great time. And thank you, Byron.
Yep, absolutely. And again, real quick, Jason is the guy behind the wildly popular jiu-jitsu app Maroon, spelled M-A-R-U-N-E. And if you want to track your training and progress in jiu-jitsu, Maroon is the best app I have found to do that. And, like you hear, like you want your goal to be trackable. You want to have some sort of a hold on what you're doing. And I think that this is where this is a big leap for jiu-jitsu, is to have an app like this to where you actually track your training and your progress and see, you look over the month, okay, I missed out. Like this week, I had a pretty light week because I was away from, I had to work on my better training days, and then I was gone Saturday and Friday this week. Those are also 2 good training days. I didn't have to work them, but I was just off, but I was out of town. Man, not a whole lot of training for me this week. So maybe I'll try to pick it up next week, and by the end of the month, I can look and see how I was able to do. I think that's a tremendous tool, and it's a great app for training. And if you're on there, find me and Joe. Just search for BJJBrick, and we will pop right up.
That's why, I was talking to Joe earlier today, Byron, and I was telling him how great training I had today, this morning. And I just realized why it was so good. You did not show up.
Yep. You were rolling on. You were on fire today.
I was on fire, and I rolled for a long time. I had a lot of energy in me, and it's related to Skippy Peter Pan peanut butter. I'm sorry,
Joe and Gary. I was going to tell you guys a joke about peanut butter, but you'll just spread it.
Ooh,
that was pretty bad, huh?
Oh, you're so
that was terrible. That was awful.
Yeah. You try Googling peanut butter jokes to find something better than that.
Well, it's not about peanut butter, but did y'all hear that William Shatner started a lingerie company?
No.
No. Well, it wasn't around too long, went out of business. It turns out Shatner Panties is not a good name for it.
All right.
That was good. That was good. I have never worked like in a peanut butter factory or anything, but when I was younger, I did work in an orange juice factory. I got canned.
Oh, that's clever.
The lady from HR said I couldn't concentrate.
Oh, Gary. This is pretty bad. Joe's actually wins the competition.
Good job, Joe.
Yeah, but I stole that one. Gary's probably making his up on the fly. He's clever like that.
No, I actually have to say I started off a speech with that. It was a speech for HR, and I started off with that, and I got a better reception there than I did with you guys.
Because
they were probably being nice to me.
We're actually expecting something funny to come out of you, Gary, because you've got a history.
And you've never seen it happen.
You do. You make some funny things on here. Maybe you surprised them, and that's where the element of humor came from. Like, they didn't expect the joke.
Most of the time, though, if you're giving a speech and you can have a terrible joke, but people laugh at it just because they feel bad. So, see, just like that. Just like that.
Oh, Joe's laugh.
Thanks, guys.
Wow. Some people that didn't feel bad are our Patreon supporters. We have 2 new Patreon supporters, Robert and Noah. Man, thank you,
Noah
guys.
and Robert. Thank you, guys.
You will be able to identify Noah and Robert by looking at their gis, because they're going to have a 5-inch BjjBrick gi patch attached to that. And you might even notice something else, that they have a BjjBrick sticker on something that they have. I don't know. Maybe their bumper, maybe their water bottle. That's a great place to put it. I don't know where you put the sticker, but Patreon supporters get a free 5-inch BjjBrick gi patch and a sticker mailed to them as soon as I can. And what they are doing is they heard the show. They said, wow, I really want to support this podcast. They go to the Patreon app that's in the show notes, and they could pledge $1 per episode is the most common pledge that we have. And it really helps out a lot. So thank you, Robert and Noah, for your support on Patreon. We hope to continue to bring you a show that you guys love. Guys, I think we kind of cheated the system here. We each told a pretty bad joke. Does that get us past the fake audiobook?
It might have been funnier than anything we come up with. I don't know.
Well, I'll bring a joke next week, huh?
There you go.
Well, yeah, fake audiobook about jokes, maybe. But hey, speaking of jokes and funny stuff, check us out on social media. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. And the reason I say, speaking of funny, if you go to YouTube and you search BjjBrick, find our page, and grilled cheese, you will find Byron's funny grilled cheese video. So check it out. Also, check out the BJJ app.
Oddly enough, I am dominating the Google search term for BJJ grilled cheese. Not real competitive either, but I'm the first one that pops up. Very excited about that.
I'm Googling it right now. Well,
nearly burned down the house on that video that I made.
You're right, Byron. The first thing that pops up, cooking for BJJ grilled cheese sandwich fail.
We gotta get that meal in before we head out the door for jiu-jitsu. And what quicker way than have a grilled cheese sandwich?
You only got 593 views. Well, 594 after I just looked at it. Let's get up that to 1,500. So everybody listening, we need 1,000 people or one person 1,000 times to go to that and watch it, because we want to get that from 593 views up to 1,500.
There you go. That's not very many views. And Gary has plugged it several times.
Yeah, that's the bad part. But I mean, you think about it. Really, who is going to Google BJJ and grilled cheese?
Let me tell you this.
How do you combine those together?
What idiot would make a video and title it BJJ grilled cheese?
Well, I could tell you, but
and the whole thing is just embarrassing now, because now that we're sponsored by Peter Pan peanut butter, I feel like I'm really betraying some of my roots in the grilled cheese industry and selling out to the peanut butter industry. So maybe I should make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich video for jiu-jitsu.
Have you thought about talking to a Cheese Whiz and seeing if they would sponsor? I mean, you already got the number one BJJ grilled cheese, search.
It doesn't seem like it has to be one or the other. I think peanut butter and Cheese Whiz, that'd be great pair of sponsors right there.
Yeah, I mean, what better jiu-jitsu sponsors than those two?
Yeah.
All right. Well, the possibilities are endless. And we look forward to bringing you guys a show next week. Till then, stay sweaty, my friends.
And don't forget to get your Maroon app.
Yeah, and that'll help you train hard, and you'll train smart, and you'll get better. So we'll see you on the mat, guys.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.